great to have you with us, right, as always. And speaking of America First Policies, this message is from America First Policies. You know, she's a counterterrorism expert. She's an overseas operative. She's been bestowed the highest honors for her service to the American people. Did you know that? You know who that is? That's our Deputy CIA Director, Gina Haspel. Boy, the more I see this lady, the more I like her. Now, she's under consideration to be the first female director of the Central Intelligence Agency. America First means ensuring our intelligence agencies have the best information and the best people to take the fight to our nation's enemies. Now, as CIA Director, Gina Haspel will work to combat radical Islamic terrorism while expanding American power across the globe. But despite strong bipartisan support from the intel community, liberals in the U.S. Senate are opposing her. Why? Well, they're putting politics before national security. The American people, they deserve a fighter like Gina Haspel. It's time for every patriot to take a stand. Call your senators today, 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. Tell them to support Gina Haspel as CIA Director. To learn more about America First Policies, please visit americafirstpolicies.org. That's americafirstpolicies.org. This message paid for and authorized by America First Policies Incorporated. Joining us now on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Alex Titus. He's a senior policy advisor with America First Policies. Alex, great to have you with us.
Hey, great to have you here, John. Good morning.
All right, so the Haspel nomination looks like it's in good shape, right? Joe Donnelly came off for Democratic Senator, Indiana. Joe Manchin, Democratic Senator of West Virginia. These are two states that the president won pretty handily. West Virginia by 39 or something. Indiana by 19. Both Donnelly and Manchin in tough re-election fights. They come out for Haspel. Only two Republicans have said they're not voting for Haspel, Rand Paul and John McCain. So you do the math, and that should put her over the top, right?
Yeah, it definitely should. And we want to thank you and thank your listeners as well for continuing to call their senators from whatever states they represent and just make sure that those senators actually do come forward and do vote yes to confirm Gina Haspel. I mean, as you said, she has an impeccable resume and she did a phenomenal job as Deputy Director of the CIA, and she would be the first woman ever to actually lead the CIA, which would be a pretty great achievement in itself. And yeah, because of some of the pressure just we've been putting on, we've had folks like Donnelly and we've had folks like Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia actually come on board, which looks to have put Gina Haspel hopefully over the edge to be confirmed. And she'll actually have her vote today in front of the Intelligence Committee, which is looking likely that she will receive the yes recommendation from the committee. And then if she does receive that, she will go before the full U.S. Senate for a vote, where, as you said, she's expected to be confirmed, which is fantastic.
You know, when that happens, I think she's going to pick more votes up. I'm really interested to see what ranking member of the Senate Intel Committee, Mark Warner, does from Virginia, the vice chairman there. Warner's dealt with her on a continual basis, obviously in his position as vice chair of Intel. You know, he has to talk with her a lot. So it'll be interesting to see if he votes no when it's fait accompli. But what goes on here, as you know, Alex, is the statesmanship is gone. There's no statesmanship. It's all politics now. And so Warner looking to run for president or maybe be a VP pick, you know, he's got his sights on that. So now he's got to weigh his vote on Haspel with how that reconciles with the liberal progressive base in his party, how that might affect his chances of running for president or being a VP choice going forward. It's really a sad time when politics have just invaded every aspect now of decision-making for people. Don't you agree?
Exactly. And we saw this, too, with Mike Pompeo, who originally, when he was confirmed to be director of the CIA, I mean, everything that had been known about Mike Pompeo in terms of what Democrats deemed was controversial statements all of that had happened when he had been or before he'd been confirmed to be CIA director. And then when he was becoming to be Secretary of State, I mean, that was even looking potentially like he could have a very, very slim vote, which at the end of the day was not when it actually came down to voting time. But I mean, yeah, it's funny how a lot of those Democrats, even for Pompeo, refused to vote for him for Secretary of State just because of the politics. And it looks to be the same with Gina Haspel, who folks have continued to basically on the left condemned her for sort of being too tough on terrorism after 9/11, which to me, and I think the rest of America, just seems a little bit ridiculous that these folks are bringing up sort of occasions that came during 2003 and 2004, where a majority of the country basically agreed that we had to get extremely tough on terrorism to help counter some of these folks in Al-Qaeda and other things who were planning to attack our country. And I think you're right, John, that the sort of politics aspect of it has just taken over everything, and that we can have someone like Gina Haspel, who is a career CIA officer and has not really shown a whim of political leanings one way or another besides just doing her job effectively, is potentially barely going to make it past the Senate confirmation just because Democrats are concerned who are potentially going to run for president or run for other higher offices.
Yeah, I mean, I think this works both ways, and it's kind of a sad situation that we have right now. I mean, I look back at a time where you had real statesmen, Alex, in the Senate. You had Scoop Jackson from Washington. You had Howard Baker from Tennessee. I mean, these people took partisan politics out of a lot of their decisions in these types of things. But right now, we just don't have that. Everything is just driven by who's going to give me money, what's my base going to say, how's that going to affect my future, rather than what is the right thing to do. And even when you look at Manchin, I mean, Manchin, look, this guy's under fire. He's not going to get reelected. Morrissey's going to beat him. But you even look at that vote and say, was that a real vote, or is that because he's trying to placate the fact that Trump won the state by 39.5? I don't know. That's really the problem today. Alex, let's get to Jerusalem and the protest on the Gaza Strip. I was on Al Jazeera yesterday, and a lot of the panelists I was on with really blaming the president for moving the embassy to Jerusalem and igniting this protest, which has now ended up in many innocent people being shot, gunned down by Israeli defense forces as they massed protest along the Gaza Strip. What is your take on the whole thing, Alex?
Yeah, so I think it was a really fantastic thing that President Trump actually delivered on a promise that a number of presidents had promised during the campaign, which was to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and to recognize a portion of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And President Trump actually came through and thankfully fulfilled that promise. And, I mean, it's no surprise to me. Since 1948, Jerusalem has been the seat of nearly the entire Israeli government, at least the western side of it. And the city itself holds thousands of years of Jewish history and religious importance. And even despite this, we still see other countries at the United Nations try to pass resolutions that deny that Jerusalem has any significance to the Jewish people or that the state of Israel has any right to any portion of the city of Jerusalem, which I think to any of your listeners and myself just seems absolutely ridiculous. And, it was really sad, John, what happened yesterday on the Gaza border and that so many lives had to be lost. And, I think that me personally, I completely respect that the people in Gaza have legitimate concerns, that they, of course, have the right to protest, and that, every country folks should have the right to voice their opinions in a peaceful way. But, I mean, we just know from yesterday, too, that it will be interesting to see what comes out and see how many of these folks who were potentially killed were affiliated with Hamas. And we know that Hamas, a terrorist organization, was actually giving money to individuals who agreed to sort of rush the border fence, and also would tell their families that they would ensure that they would get sort of a monthly stipend if basically these family members would go and sort of not sacrifice themselves, but rush over the border. And Hamas knew very well that the Israelis would likely be forced to open fire on these individuals if they were to get too close to the border. So, I mean, it's just a sad situation overall on the Gaza border. And I just think it's really terrible, John, that Hamas just keeps firing up these tensions and sacrificing innocent lives to help advance their cause.
Well, look, I mean, what you say is very interesting, and I want our listeners to really engage with this. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Hold this thought. I'm with Alex Titus. He's a senior policy advisor for America First Policies. Alex talking about the fact that Hamas offered those that protested and rushed up to the border, if they survived, basically a check. I mean, I don't even know how to put this. So, Alex, tell us again about this protest on the Gaza Strip was incited by Hamas, that they promised cash awards to people that went there and put their lives at risk. What evidence do you have in that, and can you elaborate on that?
Of course. So, I mean, this is pretty well known that Hamas and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, who actually runs the West Bank, they devote a significant amount of their dollars every year to sort of what is titled as martyrs funds. And these martyrs funds are literally sort of bigger funds that are used to pay for families or individuals who eventually go to jail who commit acts of terrorism against the Jewish state. And the PLO has a lot more money than Hamas because the United States provides them with generous aid, and so do other countries in the United Nations. But Hamas also has sort of their own sort of martyrs or sort of terrorist fund that they pay individuals, and this is pretty widely known. And I mean, any of your listeners could just Google this and find this almost immediately on a number of different websites. Hamas does not pay as well as the PLO because they don't have as much money. But I mean, it's really sad, John, that these folks in Gaza are literally suffering so much that they feel monetary incentive basically to go and sort of attack the Jewish people and attack the state of Israel and try to commit terrorist acts. And I was just looking a little bit earlier, and it looks like folks who actually were deceased at the border were getting paid somewhere around $3,000 which is a significant amount in the actual Gaza area. But it's just really sad that the situation has turned into this, where even the legitimate protesters that were there yesterday who were protesting the decision peacefully, they're basically forced to get lumped into this sort of Hamas protesting terrorist group just because Hamas is escalating things so much on their side of the border.
You know, it's really unfortunate, but Hamas has been doing this forever. But one of the issues we have here, Alex, is this, people say Hamas is a terrorist organization. They engage in this type of inciting violence, but also they're a legitimate political party with people that get elected to various parliaments and governments in the Middle East. How do you reconcile that, Alex?
Yeah, so it's definitely not, and you're of course right that Hamas and sort of other more radical Islamic groups in some
Hezbollah,
countries in the Middle
same
East
thing.
Are
Go ahead.
Sort of legitimate political parties in those areas. And I think really the way that you help to counter them is by one sort of, even for how bad this sounds, is letting them take part in some of these election processes with some of these more moderate parties. So, for example, during the Israeli elections back in the during the Palestinian elections back in the late 2000s, Hamas basically had sort of won a legitimacy in the parliament and had won more seats than the PLO. And instead of the PLO actually moving forward with the process, they basically just decided to shut down the parliament. And then, so after that, Hamas basically then turned into the radical Islamic group that we know it as today, and sort of the split between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip of what the situation we know today actually had happened. So in terms of, I think you have to sort of look for some of the more moderating forces, but that since these are legitimate political parties, no matter how bad they are, I think it's better to set them to the will of the people and actually make them fulfill the services of government, which Hamas is doing very poorly at right now in Gaza. And it's fairly well known that if there were elections in Gaza today, that Hamas would likely lose those just because they've done such a bad job of performing the actual services of government.
No question about it. You know what? That is really good analysis, and I appreciate that. I've got about a minute and a half, Alex. Let's go to North Korea. And now the summit is set June 12th in Singapore. Hopefully I'm going to be there covering that. What do you look for in this meeting? Kim Jong-un said he's going to show good faith by destroying some of his launch testing sites before June 12th. What do you think?
Yeah, so the thing that most folks need to sort of understand going into the Kim Jong-un Trump talks is that the North Koreans are in a much better negotiating position than Iran was in 2015, just because North Korea already has they have the nuclear weapons, and they also have, at least we think they have, the capacity to be able to deliver those weapons at least to the sort of western part of the United States, which would include large cities such as Los Angeles, which obviously has millions of people in it. So that's sort of a big difference in terms of this, is that the North Koreans are in a much better position to negotiate than the Iran was in 2015. But, I think that the Trump administration has said that they will push for full denuclearization and that a deal will not be reached unless that we actually have that. And I think with the president's decision last week on the Iranian nuclear deal, which he pulled out of, is that the president is going into this looking to sort of de-escalate tensions in the area, which is good and which is something that 80% or something of Americans approve, that just the meeting is happening in general, but that the president isn't going to be afraid to walk away from what he considers to be a bad deal, and if he considers the North Koreans to not be acting in good faith. I think that's a really key sort of aspect of this, is that the meeting is a really good thing in general, but that we know if we're not able to get a good deal, that Trump is going to keep his maximum pressure campaign to the fullest, and we're going to keep sort of these hardcore sanctions and cutting off trade that are really drying out the North Korean regime, to sort of force them into behaving in the proper way.
I'm out of time. I want to thank Alex Titus. Alex, we're out of time. Thank you for being with us. America First Policies. More information, go to americafirstpolicies.org.